Dr. Ramamurthy, Dr. Mathur, the scientist delegates and the students present here. At the outset, I would like to thank Dr. Ramamurthy, who is the convener of the session, for inviting me to speak at the occasion. And also, he was just telling you, this session will be about the climate change. And we are all worried about climate change these days. And it is, in a way, it is correct that he invited me to speak first, because we all know the life originated first in water. So what I thought was, I'll just talk about, because I was previously working with the fisheries sector of the country also. So I just thought it will be right to talk on this occasion that the impact of climate change, especially in fisheries, because fisheries even now is the major contributor of the foreign exchange, major contributor of the foreign exchange to our country. And fish, as you know, it is previous session was on nutrition, and it so happens that fish will be the cheapest protein which is available to the rural poor in the country. So I thought I will just mention that also. So coming to the Indian fisheries, we have got different sectors which cater to fisheries in India. The first, it comes from the marine sector, then from the freshwater sector, brackish water, that is a mixture of fresh as well as marine sector, and cold water, right from the Ganges, Brahmaputra and all, it originates, and then there is cold water fisheries exist there. And coming to the sustainability, when you talk about fisheries, you have to consider the post-harvest sector also. And the sector's growth trend I have just given in a graph. It is straight going up, but the wild catch is coming down, the aquaculture is picking up. It is worth mentioning that India is second world in world largest fish production and aquaculture production in the world, and the export has reached, as I was telling, it is the largest foreign exchange earner, that it has crossed the US dollars 5.5 billion during the year 2014-15. About 14 million people directly or indirectly engaged in fisheries, and that is the bread earner for them. And coming to the climate change, it has got significant effect. It has a positive as well as a negative effect. So the production loss, if climate change affects the production loss will affect the food security and livelihood of fishermen communities. And some areas may experience rise in fish population due to migration of species from other places. There are research studies which has proved that migration of fishes takes place. For example, I just take an example of the oil sardine, where oil sardine was available in the west coast, especially up to the Karwar, that is the Mangalore coast, and beyond that it was not available. Now we see the oil sardines, it forms a landing in Maharashtra, sometimes in Gujarat also, and in the west coast it was not there, it never has been available in the Chennai coast, but now it is available up to Puri and sometimes in West Bengal also. So which means that there is a change in the water temperature, or some changes is occurring due to the climate, wherein the migration is taking place. So in a way, it is good that the different fish species is available for consumption in different parts of the country. So that is why I said it can be positive or negative. And rise in water temperature, especially very vulnerable species like corals and all, no, this cause damage of coral reefs and mangrove ecosystem, which directly reduce the fish productivity. And this climate pattern have influenced the breeding pattern of carp and species shift and migrations. That is because when you have untimely rain, the fishes does not, otherwise no, the breeding is almost coincided with the rain, and then they don't know when it is to breed or whether it is the right time to breed and all, no. So it causes disruption in the breeding cycle. And shifting of monsoon pattern and heavy rainfall during post-monsoon affects the breeding of Indian major carp. I thought I'd just talk about the cold water fisheries in the beginning. So we have seen migration of the carp species towards the upper reaches of Himalayas. Previously, it was not available in Haridwar and all, no, the Indian major carbs. Only the cold water species like trout, salmon and all were available. But now we see a shift in population where Indian major carbs migrate up to gangetic fishes like Glossogobius giuris and such species, the colder stretch of Haridwar it is available. And this optimal temperature reported for spawning of especially Tenulosa ilicia is now changed and takes place in a temperature ranging to about 32 degrees centigrade. And in the inland sector, an institute which is called the Inland Fisheries Research Institute in Barakpur has taken up a study. A composite vulnerability index was developed for 13 districts in West Bengal based on the functional relationship of components like sensitivity, exposure and adaptive capacity using 19 indicators related to inland fisheries. And they have assessed that there is a direct shift in the vulnerability index, and also a change in temperature definitely affects the availability of the fishes. And then coming again to the colder stretches, especially the water spread area of the lakes due to sedimentation and consequence to ecological changes, and increased runoff is taking place. And see, there are 8 lakes names I have just mentioned, and also I have just the water spread area and perimeter that also shows that there is a decrease in the water spread area, which means that the availability of water is coming down each year. And also, especially in the colder stretch of the water availability areas and all, no, in the summer season it is almost dried up. So, an alteration of natural habitat where no water is available, the cold water fishes has led to the loss of spawning and feeding and breeding grounds. And now coming to the marine sector, I have just shown that a rise in sea surface temperature, it is only about 0.2 degrees centigrade in 50 years, but we, as I told you in the beginning, we have seen a definite change of migration pattern on also the availability of fishes in the seawater. That is, one is oil sardine, and another one I would like to tell you about is the availability of the mackerel, which is it is a pelagic fish, and it was normally available in the pelagic waters, but now it forms a catch in the trawling grounds also, which means that there is a shift in the migration pattern. It goes down or maybe dives down deep. Maybe it is because of the increase in the temperature. And sea level rise, repeatedly when you talk about nutrition, when you talk about agrobiodiversity, everything, Dr. Swaminathan also was mentioning about the sea level rise and available area for agriculture. Agriculture in the sense, he says that salt tolerant varieties have to be developed. Here I have to now tell about the availability of the water area for aquaculture. So it could be my sea level rise could be in a way positive, so that lot of areas will be available for aquaculture, but also it is negative by way of the incursion of seawater into the agriculture fields. And 1 meter sea level rise displaces about 7.1 million people and about 5,764 kilometers square of land area, which will be lost forever. And now, the sea level anomaly, especially in the northern Indian Ocean, showed a linear increasing trend about 0.31 millimeter per year, and sea level rise is relatively low in the Arabian Sea, but it is high in the Bay of Bengal. And during 2050, it is expected to rise by 9 to 30 centimeters. So 30 centimeters means our Lakshadweep and all will be underwater. So this is the type of change in the pattern of the climate or maybe the environment which is taking place. And when you talk about the vulnerable species, just an example of the Great Barrier Reef, they have shown very clearly that a bleaching effect has taken place because of the rise in temperature, and the same type of effect is we have noticed in the Lakshadweep area also. I have just shown the healthy corals as well as the bleached corals. This is the actual ground level photograph which was taken in the Lakshadweep waters. And a healthy coral, that is bleached, a healthy coral, that is fungia and bleached coral. And also when it comes to the giant clam, Tridacna, so that also we see that it is dead and open. That white color is just because of it is dead. So this is the type of underwater ecosystem which is available, and with a small change in the rise in temperature, it is very much affected. And coming to the loss of eelgrass due to the rise in temperature, which just drives away the availability of the dugong, sea cows in the area. So again, when you talk about the endangered sea cows and conservation, the availability of dugong is completely lost when eelgrass is not available. And then extreme climatic events and climate change impact I have just made. It could be floods. Floods again means the aquaculture has to be, will be washed off permanently, and storms, surge of storms and cyclones, and again sea level rise, then change in oceanographic variables like temperature, wind velocity, currents, wave action, and drought, insufficient precipitation, which is non-availability of water for anything. And you cannot have anything that is under culture when water is not available. So the changes in water quality may most probably in small ponds affects because it gets dried off, and the predators into aquaculture system and crop loss, harmful algal blooms, rise in temperature, just it will trigger the algal blooms, and the economic loss with the non-availability of the fishes, or maybe a change in climate will be much more higher than we expect. The negative effects are coastal areas will be lost, and loss of land, ecosystems, infrastructure damage, and seawater intrusion into freshwater. And in the estuaries, the carrying capacity and waste accumulation also will increase. And the broodstock availability, even now we are just depending on the wild for the broodstock. So the broodstock availability will be coming down, and the salinity buildup and water scarcity, that is and high tidal amplitude also can, that is especially in the West Bengal as well as Gujarat areas, the tidal amplitude also will be high, wherein some of the aquaculture systems are very near to the sea, it can be lost because of the higher tidal amplitudes. And water exchange sometimes becomes difficult. And then you have to also see the post-harvest sector. That means when once you catch the fishes, no, at least for some time it has to be kept. And then warming of oceans and water bodies has already led to a large-scale migration of commercially utilized fishes, and also the waterborne pathogens also increase because of the higher temperature. And the domestic fish consumption may change because so far in Gujarat or maybe in Maharashtra, oil sardine was not available, but now a changing pattern of the consumption of food, that is consumption of fishes also can occur. In tropical countries, warming water bodies can lead to problems in the quality of the shellfish especially. A rise in 1 to 2 degrees centigrade can initiate the spoilage very fast. Then we have just charted out some of the action plans out of effective cold chain system, starting from onboard catch to retailing. And energy requirements, especially on the processing sector, will increase because higher temperature, you need more energy to make them cool down. So, and maybe alternate energy sources like wind power, solar power is required, or it has to be harnessed for refrigeration purposes. And countries may have to reframe their fish export policies to accommodate these changes. Because again, carbon sequestration and all, no, WTO will have some restrictions for that, and we may have to do accordingly. And in seafood safety, and I was telling about the higher increased incidence of the foodborne pathogens, a change and survival of the foodborne pathogens will increase, and in the change in the host susceptibility has to be seen, and change in emergence and incidence of intensity of pathogens. So this will cause due to the increase in temperature and extreme weather events, especially in contamination of food and feed with pathogens. And acidifications, as I told you, it can definitely affect the coral reefs, and change in the occurrence of the pathogenic vibrios. Then the transport pathways of contaminants, because the like lead, cadmium, mercury and all, no, there are some pathogens already occurring in the seawater, but there will be definitely a change in the transport pathways of these contaminants also. And the sum and substance is, there are a lot of economic changes which will come, wherein the production changes may impact the economy with respect to cost and revenue for different stakeholders. Different stakeholders, which I mean is right from the fishermen who catches the fish, those who consume the fish, those who export the fish, and those who just preserve the fish. Then markets for new fish species in fisheries in aquaculture has to be emerged, and then adapting fishery system to a carbon regulated economy. So that has to be emerged, and pressure on the international trade barriers, agreements on climate drivers, and their economic impact on domestic food security, that also will be changed. Then assessing the opportunities, I told that about carbon sequestration in marine environment, that will just take the forefront. And the governance, what we have to do is the reducing the fishing and other anthropogenic pressures, which replenishes the fish stocks. Otherwise, right now, there will be a shift that is already previously the larger landings from the marine sector, but now the major contribution is from the aquaculture sector. So the replenishment of the fish stocks in the wild is very important. So the governance has to be focused to the reducing the fishing and anthropogenic pressures. Stocks in good condition will have better resilience, because it will just replenish very faster, and will be able to adapt better to the climate change. The most practical way to make fish stocks resilient to climate change is to improve the management of fish habitats, either by way of integrated coastal salt management, marine protected areas, and ecosystem approach to the fisheries and managing the access. Climate change has to be included as an important component in management and in policies. And also there should be education at the education institutions level itself. No, there should be a mechanism in just teaching the students about the impacts of the climate change. And I just briefly tell about what India has done just to look into the climate change. We know that right in 1992, that United Nations Framework for Convention of Climate Change, which is a global instrument and the international agreement on the control and management of greenhouse gases. So India is a signatory for that, and it was adopted in 1992 and entered into force in 1994. The status of participation is very high. About 189 countries are signatories for that, which contains 2 annexes. Countries with obligations to take measures to mitigate the effect of climate change, and countries with obligations to provide financing to developing countries for their obligations. And the affiliated instrument is Kyoto Protocol. When you talk about the access and benefit sharing in Kyoto Protocol, this Convention of Climate Change is also a part of it. And India is one of the countries who has taken an action plan in climate change, that is NAPCC, which has got 8 instruments: the National Solar Mission, National Mission for Enhanced Energy Efficiency, National Mission on Sustainable Habitat, National Water Mission, National Mission for Sustaining Himalayan Ecosystem, National Mission for Green India, National Mission for Sustainable Agriculture, National Mission for Strategic Knowledge for Climate Change. In all these, there is definitely an integration of the literacy as well as the action plans of climate change and how to mitigate it. And this was released in 2008. Perhaps India is the first country to have such a action plan in the whole world. And the initiative describes of the India's efforts to combat the impact of climate change in the country. And there is always a vision to create prosperous but not wasteful society, an economy which is self-sustaining. And my last slide is just to show you an example of India's plan to achieve SDG 13. SDG 13, that is Sustainable Development Goals, which Professor Swaminathan has shown in his presentation at the last. There are 17 SDGs are there. The 13 is the climate action. And what India has done is, 13 is the take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. The Ministry of Environment and Forests is the nodal ministry for that. And in collaboration with the Ministry of Home Affairs, we have to strengthen the resilience and adaptive capacity to climate-related hazards and natural disasters in all countries. And the vision up to 2030, which is charted out, is the knowledge management and capacity building to mitigate climate change. And the vision has been divided into two parts. The first 7 years, that is 2017-18 to 2023-24, undertaking and coordinating action-oriented scientific research, capacity building and awareness creation programs. And further, it is just up to 2020, that is the action plan which is charted out for this is a network of 127 institutions called Indian Network of Climate Change Assessment has been set up to share knowledge and work in collaboration with climate change issues. To implement SPC, that is a special program on climate change cells are being set up at state level, and Ministry's institutional network on environmental education, environment information system, state forest departments, state biodiversity boards are to undertake research and programs for awareness raising and incorporation of climate-friendly practices and early warnings. Since I come from the National Biodiversity Authority of India, I am much concerned because we are also given a mandate, that is the National State Biodiversity Boards will take an action for just building the capacity, building the awareness, and on the mitigation of the climate change. Thank you very much.